And the Gemara was discussing when you counted kiyas, is each coil a separate kiyah? Like the kiyah is a special, is number one, and the shvarim is number two, and the next kiyah is number three. Or do you look at the whole set? Kiyah, shvarim, kiyah, is that considered one? The nafkamina, right off the bat, at first glance, is just how you count it, right? You divide your total koilas by three or not. That's really what we've counted until now. But we're going to see it's going to have a lot more of a nafkamina. So we got up to the bottom of the Nun Gimel of the base, and the Gemara was looking for a reason for a makar of Rabbi Yehuda, looking at them as a set, and for the Rabbanan that perceives them each individually, and they brought rayas in the Psukim, which says Usakatem Teruah, which indicates that Teruah and Tkiyah is one and the same, and the Rabbanan said that it's not likely because when it came to gathering the kal, there was only a tkiyah and not a trua. So does it make sense to say that if normally the mitzvah is one full note, which according to Rabbi Yehuda is a full set of tkiyah, trua, tkiyah, how could the Torah say do half of it when it comes to gathering the kal? And that Rabbi Yehuda said, who said that's a mitzvah? That's just a way to gather the kal. And the Rebbe says, no. Once the Torah said that this is how you gather the kal, it becomes a mitzvah. So a lot of the Achronim jump on this Gemara and ask, will you never find such a thing that the Torah says do a whole mitzvah, sometimes in half a mitzvah, other times? What about the Zrik Saddam? Sometimes, like by a chapash, you have to do it on all four chronos, and then there's a shlomo where it's time shein arba. So you find very often in the Torah where there's sometimes a full set and sometimes a half a set. And there were some other examples as well that the Achronim asked. Okay, so now let's go to the next Gemara. Now, this next Gemara, a couple of lines, is going to actually be very relevant to Halacha L'Maisa in Hilchos Tkiyah Shofar. And at 9 o'clock, usually Rabbi Weinberg comes, so he'll be able to help us because he's a Baal Tekeiah. I'm curious to know how it's done. So let's see what the Hilchos Gemara says. Now that we know that there's a machlokes whether or not the Tkiyah, true Tkiyah, is one thing or three separate notes, Kaman Az Laha, Damar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana said, Ein bein tkiyah l'trua v'loy klum. You cannot pause between the tkiyah and the trua at all. Command, who would that be like? It would be like Rabbi Yehuda. And the logic is, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's one note. It's one set. So you can't pause. What does it mean? What's the definition of not pausing v'loy klum? Not pausing even a drop? So Rashi, v'loy klum means l'hoya mafsik b'intayim elo kidei neshima. It means you cannot pause more than the amount of time it takes to take a breath, which indeed is a pause. And that's a very, very important Rashi. We'll get to that in a second. More Pshita, of course it would be Rabbi Yehuda, because he's the one who says that all of them are one note. So maybe that this is even going according to Rabbanan, who hold that it's multiple notes. Why does the Kahana say, Ein ben kia l'trua v'loy klum? The Gemara is just lafukim with Rabbi Yochanan, who gives you an extended period of time to be mafsik between the notes. If you were 9 kiyas at 9 different times during the day, yotza you'll be yotza. And on that, Rav Kahana commented that according to Rabbanan, it has to be together, but it doesn't mean it can't be any hefek. It doesn't mean it's one big note. It just means you can't be mafsik so long. Kamashmalon that you can. Maybe that's takapshat. Why do you actually come to the conclusion that Rav Kahana is going in the sheet of Rav Yehuda that it's all one note? He does stress v'loy klum. V'loy klum would indicate that there's less of a pause than the Rabbanan would typically allow. Let's just quickly see the Rashi. Time have Sukka mu'atas. You can be mafsik a little bit. You shouldn't wait a long time in between the notes. So Teshet Kiyas, what are these 9 tekiyas about? So Rashi tells us the 9 kiyas are as follows. The 9 kiyas that were said that you have to hear on the Rosh Hashanah Torah. Shalosh l'malchiyos, which would be Tkiyah, Trua, Tkiyah. So there's 3 there. The Shalosh l'zachronos, the Shalosh l'shofar, Kedamim Rosh Hashanah. So really, all you need is 9 kiyas. We do a lot more kiyas. Why? So Rashi, the high dav didn't fei. That's what we do. That we do a lot more. Mishum sveika the truhi. We don't know exactly what is the note of the trua. Lo yadinan iganuchihi iyalulahi. Is it 3 short blasts or is it 9 really short blasts? Since we don't know what it is, we have to do the full set. And that's why we do 30 kailas, is because we have to do kia, shvarim, kia. But since we don't know what the shvarim is, we do it in 3 sets, which ends up being 30 kailas. That's why we actually blow 30 times in each set. Okay, so this takes us into a very important question, which is halacha lemaisa, in Kishofer. And the shaila is as follows: when you blow between the tkiya and the shvarim trua, is the baltakir supposed to pause on it or not? So Rashi told us that you're allowed to pause to breath, to take a breath. The Meiri says you're mechuyev to take a breath. The Meiri says you're mechuyev to take a breath. So now we have a problem, because it's not like Rashi says you can pause a little, take a breath, but if you're machmer to do it fast, you're right. According to the Meiri, if you don't pause, it's not a good coil, because it blends them together. So this is. I'm sorry.
Meiri is never taken into account halacha l'maaseh.
So let's have a look. Let's have a look in the Shulchan Aruch.
How do you blow those tkiyas without taking a breath? Okay, you have to.
So we're just focusing now in between the tkiya and the shvarim. That's what we're talking about. I'm not talking about the next tkiya or all of the tkiyas. We're just speaking about between the tkiya and the shvarim. So let's see what the Mechaber says in Tov Kuf Tzadik Sif Daled. Shloisha shvarim, the 3 shvarim. You have to make them in one breath. That's what the Mechaber says. And the Mishabur comments on that. That's what we do by the trua. You shouldn't be splitting it into 2. So I guess that's between the shvarim and the trua. Since it's supposed to be one note, we have to look in Shimachas. So this is talking about the 3 shvarims. The 3 shvarim, you go poo, 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 you shouldn't take a breath in between each of the shvarim. Ava shloisha shvarim, trua, utrua, the kia shvarim, trua, kia, what about between the shvarim and the trua? So between each of the 3 notes of the shvarim, you for sure are not supposed to take a breath. What about between the shvarim and the trua? There are those who hold that you don't have to blow the shvarim and the trua in one breath. You can actually pause a moment to catch your breath in between. But that's only if you don't make more of a pause than that. Okay, and Rashi and the Mishabur says the reason why you could pause a little bit there is because normally the 2 different styles of crying are not done together. They're 2 different things, and therefore it's logical that a pause should be allowed. But there are those who hold that it does have to be b'nishimachas. So we have a machlokes of whether or not it's supposed to be. So I'm going to look at the Mishnah Berurah. The time, the reason why they do want it in one breath, even though normally the 2 different types of cryings are not done in one breath. The reason why we blow the shvarim trua, the combined note, because we're choishes that maybe that is what the Torah means when the Torah is mechayiv you to blow the trua. Does Yosy de trua, which means it is one note. It's one note referred to as the trua. In Cain, if it is one note, and you shouldn't be pausing in between them. It'll be like a trua that you split in half. Which means if you pause between the shvarim and the trua, you'd have to blow it again. When we come up in the Mishnah Berurah says, "Lo yiska shvarim trua b'koyach echad built ishum hefsed." You definitely shouldn't blow it with one blow. In other words, you shouldn't go from the shvarim straight into the trua. There should be a pause after the shvarim, and then you should start the trua. You see, we don't realize how much is going. When we're standing there listening, we don't realize all the different little factors that the Rav and the Lokoyer are thinking about. We just listen to everything seems simple, but it seems there's a lot of detail. It wouldn't be considered nishima achas And a yafsik mat, you should pause for a nanosecond in between the last shvarim and the first shura. But it shouldn't be long enough that you can take a breath. And that's how, I mean, if I remember correctly, that's how they will shvarim, two, and then another blast to start the sequence of the truths. Zokter Machaber, what should you do? You have two shitas. One that says take a break in between the shvarim and the trua, and one that says don't take a break. The Yerei Shemayim, Yesi de Kulam. He'll do both ways. And therefore, the key is before we start the Shtila Shmini Ashrei Musaf, Yaseb and the Shima Achas. He should blow the shvarim and the truas with one breath. With keys to the Ma'umit, but the keys to the blows of Shmini Ashrei, Yaseb and Stein the Shimas, he should pause in between them and take a little bit of a break. And the Mishabur says, I will don't do it the opposite. Do it b'dafka this way. Which we do. Then you could do it the opposite. Because it covers both ways. Now, look at the Ramah. Haga, a minik haposhet, but the minik haposhet is lasais hakoil the shtein neshima shtein lashanas. So he's saying Pascal like one of the two shitas, Pascal like Rebbe and Tam, who hold it should do it in two neshimas. So the problem is we finished learning the Mechaber, we finished learning the Ramah, and we still are confused because are you supposed to do it neshima achas or shtein neshimas? So that's the Mishabura comments. If that's the minik to blow the shvarim and the trua in one breath, then you could do it. Lo yishanu min hagam. Gamkim lo yishanu min hagam. Vafilu fi min hagenu must have been the shima achas yotza. And anyway, if you did it to the shima achas, you would be out anyway. I believe what we do is you pause, only pause for a moment, not longer than that. When there is a shvarim trua, the Rosh calls out shvarim trua. He doesn't say shvarim and then trua, because we do want it to be very close to each other. If after the shvarim he waits, the Baltakeya waits until the Rav says trua, then that'll be a bigger hefsek. So I think we paskin, unless it's your minute to do otherwise, you're supposed to do the tkiyas to be yushav one way and the tkiyas to be another way. There's no Baltakei amongst us, but at 9 o'clock usually Rabbi Weinberg joins us. So I'm going to ask Rabbi Weinberg what he does. I never noticed that he takes a breath in between the shvarim and trua, because if it's also split second, it will be difficult to discern.
Like according to our minute, like you have to decide which shul to daven in and to know what their minute is, to know how to be yotza.
I don't even know what that means, our minute, because I don't know if all shuls, if it's been spread up now that everyone does the same thing, maybe different above them. I don't even know. I don't even know how that works.
What I mean to bring to point to mind is that like you have to know, like if it's your minute to do it like this, then you have to find your shul. Like if you're talking about the how do you blow? I want to know, like, do you take a breath? Like that's what you're telling us.
I'm going to ask Rabbi Weinberg. I'll ask Rabbi Weinberg. He'll be able to clarify it for us. I'll have to ask Rabbi Weinberg.
It seems that the minik trumps the din, the halacha, according to the Mishnah Berurah. You see, they pass him one way, but we're not to do that. The
Mechaber paskins to do it both ways, to be yoytze the sheet of both rishonim. Yes, take a pause and not take a pause. The Mishnah Berurah says in those places where it's a minute to always pause, you can follow the minute, because the Ramah was always a big advocate supporting Hagam because of an experience that he had. So the Ramah is just justifying the minute, but it seems like Mikra didn't supposed to do both. He's supposed to do it differently by the Umar and the Yosy. I'll ask Rabbi Weinberg today if he's here, and I'll report back. We'll get it tomorrow if I remember. Because talk tomorrow about Erev Shabbos Shabbat Chag. Let me ask you a question. If you forget Yalav Yov and Rosh Chodesh by benching, do you have to say over benching? Yeah. Why not? Because you don't have to have a meal. Right? What if it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh and you forget Yalav Yov? Do you have to say Yalav Yov? Because you have to make it for Shabbos. Let me ask you another question. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? If you didn't know that it was Shabbos for Chodesh, and you davened Musaf to count the Shabbos, right? And now you realize you didn't mention Rosh Chodesh. So what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to? You're yoked to the Musaf of Shabbos. You went yoked to the Musaf of Rosh Chodesh. So what are you supposed to do now? There's a third very interesting shaila. There's actually four shailas. The other shaila was, we say when we have Shabbos and Yom Tov, the day that Shabbos falls out on Yom Tov, by the Hasiyenu, when we're finishing up the bracha of Yom Tov, we say as follows. Let me pull out the Shemona Esrei for Shalosh Regolim. We say Hasiyenu, Hashem Elokeinu Esprichs V'Dech L'Chaim L'Shom L'Simcha L'Sazon Kasher Retziz V'Mat L'Vercheinu. And then on Shabbos we stick in Elokeinu V'Elokav V'Seinu Ritzeina V'Mnuchaseinu, and then we continue on Hachenu B'Mitzvasach. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the Nusach Hagra takes out the Elokeinu V'Elokav V'Seinu. So what's the reason for that? I don't know Ashkenaz. I didn't say Ashkenaz. I know the Gra. I didn't check up with Ashkenaz. So these are all these shilas. So let's see how that'll be relevant. The ilu l'mayla asiris loikatani. Remember when the Mishnah was listing off the different tkiyas that were made, the Mishnah glaringly omitted the set of tkiyas that were made on the step, either the fifth step from the top or the fifth step from the bottom. So who is the one that deletes that tkiyah, that set of tkiyas? Shalosh l'mayla asiris. There were three tkiyas made on the Maila asiris. The three were done by the Mizbeach. The Tana who hold that they blew shofar on the 10th step, he actually deletes the set of tkiyas that were done on the Mizbeach. And the Omer al Gabe Mizbeach, and the Tana who learned that they blew shofar on the Mizbeach, which will be Rabbi Yaakov, Einay Omer l'mayla asiris. He held you didn't blow on the Maila asiris. So there was a machlokes as to one of the sets of tkiyas that were blown during the process of bringing the water. Was the shofar blown on the Mizbeach, or what, but when they're pouring, or was the shofar blown on the steps along the way? My time is Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. What is the reasoning for Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov that you blow on the Mizbeach rather than on the steps? Zok the Gemara, even the Taka, the Psicha Sha'arim, once they already blew the shofar for heralding the opening of the doors, which was at the top of the staircase, L'mayla Asiris L'amali the Taka. What exactly is the significance of stopping on the staircase to blow shofar again? Halav Sharahu. It's not a shar. Blow by a shar. This is like the middle of the way. Why create an extra?
I said earlier, the reason was because of Hashem's name, Kaf, Yud, and Hey. Because he.
No, that's why the place on the staircase that they just stopped was in a place where it would be a Yud and a K. But why Bechlal blow on the staircases at all? Is what Belezim Yaakov is arguing. Hilchach al Gabim Mizbeach Odef. It's a defined space. Better just do it when you get back to the Mizbeach. Rabbanan say the opposite. Even the Taka Lemilui Hamayim, once they blew shofar when they drew the water from the Shiloach, then al Gabe HaMizbeach Lamli. Why blow again on the Mizbeach? So Rashi tells us, all of these tkiyas are mishum milu hamayim. They're all in honor of drawing the water. The tkiyas that he learned they made by the Mizbeach were when they put the aravas around the Mizbeach. That's when they made those tkiyas, which Rashi actually tells us in the Mishnah. So therefore, La Rava Lamalit Kia, why do I need Kia for the Rava? How Kalhanit Kia to my Sifin the Chag, Ainin Elamishum Mushaf to mine Besosa. So therefore, it's not irrelevant when they're putting the Ravas around the Mizbeach to blow the shofar. Therefore, will blow rather along the stairs, which is more focused on their process of bringing the water. Therefore, Lamila Ma'al Gabis Ba'ichlomim. Helchach Lamaila Asiris I'd rather him blow on the stair. So therefore, we don't have an extra 3 tkiyas. Either the 3 tkiyas in this number of tkiyas that were added on sukkahs were the 3 tkiyas on the steps, or of the mizbeach. Zok the Gemara. He also Rabbi Chanina Medroima. When Rabbi Chanina came from the south, when he came from the south, he brought a brisa. And this is the brisa that he brought. He quotes a pasuk. The pasuk seems to be redundant because one pasuk says, which is actually a later pasuk. B'nei Aaron HaKohanim blew with the chatzotros. She'ein tabed loimer. It shouldn't have said yisku. Could have said B'nei Aaron b'chatzotros. It shouldn't have said the word yisku. She'ein tabed loimer yisku. Shekvar Nemar, the pasuk already says, "Usekatem b'chatzotros alo leseichem balziv keshal meichem." So we already know we're talking about a tkiyah. So why is there an extra word? Why is there an extra word yisku in the pasuk? Matam yisku. So we learn from there hakoil lefi hamusafim toikim. You blow specially for every musaf, which means if you have multiple musafim, you make multiple tkiyas. And the Gemara elaborates, who Tanila, who Amarla, Rav Acha, who brought this brisa down, elaborated for us, and told us that what it means to teach us is Loimar Shatoikin al Kol Musaf and Musaf. So if you have 2 musafim, like a Shabbos and Yom Tov, so you have 2 musafim, then there's a set of tkiyas for each musaf. And therefore there would be more musafim. So this is what I was referring to earlier. When there's multiple musafim that you blow for each musaf, what exactly is it? Do we say because it's one big Yom Tov, it's one big musaf? Or do you say that it's like you have your base tefillah and then you have plugins that are added onto it, but each one is independent? There's actually a big machlokes as to how you look at it. So let's look at our first shayla that we had with Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, and you missed out Yalav V'Yavai invention. If you hold, there's 2 separate things. There's a Shabbos and there's Rosh Chodesh. So you said there it say, you didn't say the Yalav V'Yavai. And Rosh Chodesh alone doesn't mandate a meal. But there are those who learn, and I guess you'd have to ask a shayla lach. I don't know what we pass on lach l'maisa, but there are those who learn that Shabbos Rosh Chodesh is not Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. It's a new Yom Tov that's a combined Yom Tov of Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. Once it's a combined Yom Tov, then Avada that day, with all of its attributes, requires a Suda, and therefore, if you miss Yalav V'Yavai, you have to say it over here. The question with what? You have to bench again. The Tikkun Shabbos was actually a real shayla that was brought to Reb Moshe Feinstein. There was a fellow who was nebuch in jail on Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, and he didn't know Ati Yitzhak by heart. He didn't have a siddur with him, so he davened Musaf on Shabbos, Tikkun Shabbos. That's what he remembered, right? And then Baruch Hashem on Shabbos, he was free. So the shayla was, what does he do? Does he say Shemona Esrei again? So Reb Moshe paskin that he should say the weekday Rosh Chodesh Shemona Esrei, because he was already yoyted the Musafim for Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh is separate. But I believe somebody argued at Moshe. Remember who? Who is Rabbi Yashiv? Or maybe it was a Shlomo Zalman Auerbach argued at Moshe, and he yelled, no, you have to say over the whole, you have to say Ati Yitzharta, because it's a separate din of Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. I'm not sure what other Shabbos. I'm sorry?
I'm sure he didn't get the task in real time.
No, he couldn't have had pasta in real time. Right. So it's not to provide it. Tanan. Erev Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, that was in Yom Tov. So one day Chalamoid turns out being Erev Shabbos. Ho Yusham Arboam Ushmoy. Right, that was the example of our Mishnah. We were looking for an example of the maximum amount of tkiyas, which the Mishnah said was 48. And the Gemara said that that maximum was of Erev Shabbos for 11 Shavuos, because there was an additional 6 tkiyas to herald in the Shabbos. So it would have been 42, because it's the normal 21 of the regular day, plus the other 21 that was there because of Sukkot, and then there was an additional 6, which we brought it to 48. But then he said, if you hold that on a day of multiple Musafim, there's going to be multiple Shiras, and therefore multiple Kiyas, I'll give you another simple example of how you have 48 Kiyas. Listen to Shabbos, Shabbos, the day of Cholamoid, that falls on Shabbos, you can have even more than 48. Mishkachas lei chamishim v'chad, because you're going to add now another 9 tkiyas. You'll lose the 6 tkiyas of Erev Shabbos, but you add 9 tkiyas for the musaf. So 42 and 9 is 51. So why didn't the Mishnah, based on Rav Kahana's price, that when you have multiple musaf, you have multiple shiras, and therefore multiple tkiyas, we have a way to have 51 tkiyas. Omar Abzera, the reason why the Mishnah didn't say that is the Shein Toiken, the Psicha Sha'arim B'Shabbos, the 3 tkiyas that we say are blown very first thing in the morning, when they open up the doors, that is deleted on Shabbos. So it wouldn't be 51, it would be 48 again. So we picked the example of 48 of an Erev Shabbos, of Chalamoid, rather than Shabbos. Why didn't they blow for Psicha Sharim on Shabbos? So Rashi says, it's toward the bottom, it's about 5 lines before the bottom of the skinny lines. Rashi says, She'ena lemitzvah kitkir shel carbon. They're not a real mitzvah like kitkir of carbon. Without tzeva ferish, the pasuk chasiva b'kra was a kantem b'chatzoyches al oiloi seichem, which is the pasuk we quoted just a minute earlier. Aval hanach, the keys that they blew when they opened up the doors, it was l'simnin, and it was just as a announcement, sheyishmu v'yavoyu l'maymodim v'luduchanim, so that the people should come, whoever had a job to do, should come to their post. And therefore, v'loy dachu Shabbos. Hilchach, so once you delete those 3, it goes down from 51 down to 48. So that's why I didn't list it. Amarava, man ha, who is this fellow who said such a teretz who didn't grind his flour well? You know, he didn't eat his Wheaties today. He didn't do a good job. He didn't analyze it properly. There's 2 reasons why your teretz is not a good teretz. If you read the Mishnah is every single day they blew shofar for Psicha Sharim. Guess what? Shabbos is included in every single day. You cannot argue that they didn't blow those 3 tkiyas on Shabbos. And the other problem is, even if there's only 48 tkiyas on Shabbos, because you do lose those 3 tkiyas, even if you were right, so still listen to Shabbos Shabbosai Chachag. It should have listed of Shabbos Shabbosai Chachag, Hoyu Shamar Ba Ushmaina. If you have a choice of offering 2 examples of a day where there were 48 kids, and your choice is between Erev Shabbos, which is what the Mishnah selected, and Shabbos itself, which we're suggesting the Mishnah should have used, you're much better off using Shabbos itself. You know why? The Shabbos Minah Tarti, because you will learn 2 Chidushim from the halacha of Shabbos, and you'll only learn 1 Chiddush from the halacha of Erev Shabbos. From the halacha of Erev Shabbos, the only Chiddush that we learned was that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov held that you didn't have the extra set of kiyas. But on Shabbos you learn 2 things. A, Shmas Minot Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that you didn't blow Sion the Mizbeach and Sion the stairs was one or the other, which you know from Erev Shabbos as well. But you also know Shmamish Minot Rabbi Acha Bachanina. It'll Agavarcha tell you the Chiddush of Rabbi Acha that when there's 2 Musafin, you blow shofar for both Musafin. So why wouldn't the Mishnah pick an example that would teach us more lessons than the example that the Mishnah actually chose? I'll tell you the right answer as to why the Mishnah didn't choose the example of Shabbos. It's l'vishein token l'milui mayim b'Shabbos. They don't blow shofar when they fill up the water on Shabbos. You know why? Because they don't fill up the water on Shabbos. On Shabbos, they didn't go fill up the water. They would have done it the day before, like we learned, and they kept it in the container overnight. So therefore, the Batsri Tuva, they lost all of the 12 kiyas that were blown as part of the process of going to draw water. That's why it's not a good option to use Shabbos. So you have to grind your flour well, get things clear before you answer. Correct the Gemara. Let's think of another example. The list Ninami Rosh Hashanah Shechal Yosh B'Shabbos. What about Rosh Hashanah that fell out on Shabbos? Da'ika Palasa Musafim. You have 3 sets of Musafim. You have Musaf to Rosh Hashanah, you have Musaf to Rosh Chodesh, and you have Musaf the Shabbos. So there you have a whole bunch of Musafim. You have 9. You can have 27 right there. You can have 27 right there of the 3 Musafim. You have the 21 of every day, and again 27 and 21 is 48. So why wasn't that one of the examples that the Mishnah gave? The Gemara, Erev Shabbos Shabbosai Chachag Itztuchla. The Tanit B'Davka wanted to pick the example of Erev Shabbos and Sukkot, because that teaches us Lashminon to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Because we wanted B'Davka a case of Sukkot, because a case of Sukkot teaches us the halacha of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that you didn't blow shofar on the stairs, you blew by the mizbeach. Frag the Gemara, who said it's a choice of one or the other? Also, mikam reading listening ha. We're not telling you to give the example of Rosh Hashanah that fell out on Shabbos instead of the example of Erev Shabbos on Sukkot. We're suggesting listening of. Why didn't the Mishnah give us two examples of a case where you have 48 kiyas? Let's say that the Tana didn't list off all the available examples of 48. It listed one example, but it left over some of the examples, some of the possible examples. You never say that a Tana only omits one item in a list. If he's omitting and he's only selecting to say one, he'll say one, but he'll have to omit multiple. So you need to find me something else that the Tana omitted as well. We need to find another example of 48 keys in a day that the Tana omitted. So tomorrow, Erev Pesach, maybe he omitted Erev Pesach. And Rashi tells us that on the Erev Pesach, there was an extra 27 keys because each group said Hallel 3 times, and there were 3 groups. The Klal Yisrael was split up into 3 groups, the Shech, their Korban Pesach, and each group said Hallel 3 times, and they blew 3 keys by each Hallel, which gives us an extra 27 keys. And if you add that to the 21 of every day, you get 48. So Erev Pesach is not a good example of 48 keys because the Hamani Rabbi Yehudi, the Amar, Nimeim Shalkat Shlishis Lo Yigia Leimer Ahavti Ki Yishma Hashem. Rabbi Yehuda said that the third group of people that came in to shech their Korban Pesachs, there were so few because the Kehanim were able to deal with everybody in the first 2 groups that they only end up saying Hal only once. So you're not going to have 27 times. You're only going to have 20. You're going to be missing 6 keys. You'll be missing. So you're only going to have 27 minus 6. You're only going to have 21 keys. So you're not going to have the 48. You're only going to have 40. So Tosfos asks, huh?
It depends on how many people there are.
If there wasn't a third,
The Rabbi Yehuda said there never was enough people to have Hallel more than once.
I'm saying if there wasn't even a third
Group. There was a third group. There always was a third group, but they didn't have a big oilam about a third group. So therefore, it's
Why
like
is
the
each
late
group saying
Kabbalah
it 3
Shabbos
times?
in the summer. There might be a third group, but you're not going to have a big meeting. I'm sorry, David?
Why is each group saying it 3 times? Like why is it dependent?
Because it took there was a lot going on there, and it took time. It took a long time to process the karbonis. So in the period of time that it took to process the karbonis, they said Hallel 3 times. Tosfos asked the kasha. We're looking for an example of a case that the Mishnah omitted. So this is an example. So why are you asking from Yehuda? We're trying to find an example. So let's say it's going to Yehuda. So we're trying to find an example. So you say according to Yehuda, it's not a good example. So say the Mishnah is not a good according to Yehuda. We're just looking for an example of a case that Tana omitted. The Tosfos is bleibt fair. But strike the Gemara. How could you say that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda's Shita? And that's why Erev Pesach doesn't work because you don't have enough halals. We said right after the Mishnah, we said we're not going to go according to Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't count each note separately. Rabbi Yehuda anyway doesn't hold you have so many notes because he always looks at each set. So our Mishnah is not going according to Rabbi Yehuda anyway. Dr. Gemara, no, V'dilma Haitana Savala Kavasa Bechada. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda about the fact that there was no third set, or there was only one halal in the third set. But he argues about the count, and he holds that every note is a separate count. So we're still looking for an example of something else that the Tana left out. If Erev Pesach fell on Erev Shabbos, even though you lose the 6 kiyas from the third group, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but you gain the 6th kiyas that you always do extra on Erev Shabbos to herald the incoming of Shabbos, the apik shis v'ayel shis. We could substitute the 6 that we lost from the third kat with the 6 that we added for Erev Shabbos, and once again you have 48. So at the end of the day, there's 2 examples of blowing 48 kiyas on a day that the Tana omit. The maximum kiyas per day is 48. Is that so? I'm going to show you could have more than 48. Erev Pesach, that falls out on Shabbos, where there's going to be more than 48. How do you get that? Rabbi Yehuda, Chamshin, V'chada. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it will be 51. So what is the cheshbon? The cheshbon is as follows. You have the 21 of every day. Okay. Then you have the extra, it's Erev Pesach Chodesh, but then you have the extra 9 of the Musafin, which makes it into 30. Then you have the extra 6 of Erev Shabbos. You have the 9 of Shabbos. So you have 30. You have 30, and then you have the extra 27. Right. You have the extra. You have the 30 plus the 27 is 57. So why is it only 51? You have 21 plus 9 is 30, and then you have and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you don't have 27. You only have 21 on Erev Pesach because you didn't say Hal 3 times in the last group. So you have 21 for Erev Pesach plus the 30 of the regular 21, 9 of Shabbos plus the 21 of Erev Pesach. It will be 51. And according to the Rabbanon, who said that Hal was said all 3 times, even in the third cut, so then there's 27 times for Erev Pesach, there's 21 times for every day, which brings it to 48, and then there's an extra 6. So there's an extra 9 because of Shabbos that brings it to 57. Zok to Gemara, the reason why the Mishnah didn't use that example is Kikatani Midi the Isa B'chal Shana. The Tana wanted examples of things that occur every year. Not every year does Erev Pesach fall out on Shabbos. Erev Pesach, Shachal Yosh B'Shabbos, the lesser B'chal Shana B'Shana. It's not something that occurs every year, like Katani. But Erev Shabbos on Sukkot occurs every year, because every year Sukkot has 7 days. One of those 7 days is going to be. Sorry?
You just said before that this example is good enough for the example that you left out, but it's not good enough for the example that you put in.
Erev Pesach Shechol Yosh B'Shabbos? Well, the Gemara slugged it up.
No, the last one.
Erev Pesach Shechol Yosh, the Erev Shabbos.
Oh, the Erev.
So here's Erev Pesach Shechol Yosh B'Shabbos. But that doesn't help you. But Erev Pesach Shechol Yosh B'Shabbos also doesn't fall out every year that way.
I'm saying it's good enough for it to leave out.
Right, but it's not good enough to be mentioned. So you're right. So Zok to Gemara, since Erev Pesach falling on Shabbos does not happen every year, I didn't want to give such an example. In fact, Gemara, what about Erev Shabbos falling out on one of the days of Sukkot? It doesn't happen every year either. Alto Erev Shabbos, Shebesoicha Chag, Mi Isa B'chol Shana, Zim in the Lebish Kachaslei. I'm going to give you an example of a year where there is no Erev Shabbos that falls out on Sukkot, on a day where you would have the Simchas Beit HaSheva, Ve'echadami, going to Chal Yom Tov Rishon Erev Shabbos. If the first day of Sukkot is Erev Shabbos, or anyway you don't do Nisach HaMayim, because they didn't do the Nisach HaMayim on Shabbos or Yom Tov, right? They didn't do Nisach HaMayim. They didn't do the Tkiyas. They didn't do the whole procession. They didn't do the Tkiyas. So that would be a perfect example. So how could you say that Erev Shabbos that falls out on Sukkot is the example that Tana gives? That doesn't happen every year. Look, Gemara, no. Ki mikla Yom Tov Rishon Erev Shabbos. If it would ever happen that the first day of Sukkot would be on Erev Shabbos, matchi dechinule. They push off. They would add a day to El to push it off by 1 day. Why? What's the problem with having Sukkot on Erev Shabbos? There's no problem at all. But if you have Sukkot on Erev Shabbos, it's going to come out that Yom Kippur was on Sunday. And they don't want you to do something. My time of even declare Yom Tov Rishon Shachag Liyas Erev Shabbos, Yom Kippur Amos have it. The Chag b'Shabbos it would fall out on Shabbos. Why don't you want to have Yom Kippur on Sunday? For 2 reasons. A is because the vegetables that you would want to prepare to break your fast on, you'd have to prepare them from before Shabbos. They'd be 2 days old. They didn't have refrigeration in those days, and they would be ich. A. B is if a mace dies, the beginning of Shabbos, they won't be able to deal with it until Sunday night. So we didn't want to have that because it's not covered mace. So because of that, they arranged it that we should never have Yom Kippur on a Sunday. Therefore, we push it off, and therefore it'll never happen that the first day of Sukkot will be Erev Shabbos. Is it true that we push off? We're going to add a day to push it off, but not Chelvei Shabbos, Kraven B'Yom Kippurim. If you had Chelev left over from Shabbos, so for instance, the Tamas Shalbein Harbayim was shechted on Shabbos. You didn't have a chance to put the Chelev on the Mizbeach yet. Now tonight is Yom Kippur. You can put it on the Mizbeach on Yom Kippur. So clearly that had to occur when Yom Kippur was on a Sunday. Reb Zera said, "Kavin be Rav beBavel." When we were by Rav in Bavel, Hava Amri, Hadetanya, we said over this brisa, Yom Kippurim Shechol Yos Erev Shabbos. If Yom Kippur fell out on a Friday, Lo Hayu Toikin, they wouldn't blow the shofar. Uvematzoi Shabbos, Lo Hayu Mavdilan. So they wouldn't blow if Yom Kippur fell out on Erev Shabbos, they wouldn't blow the shofar to announce the coming of Shabbos. And Rashi tells us because we're already in the Kedusha Chamura, there's no need to tell everybody that you have to stop doing malacha, you have to stop carrying now, because you're already doing that from the day before. And Uvematzoi Shabbos, and if Yom Kippur fell out on a Sunday, they didn't make Avdallah Matzoi Shabbos. Divrei HaKohen. And we learned that everybody holds like that. Kesalikas lahasam, but when I actually went down to Bavel, Ashke Chasei, the Rabbi Yehuda Bered Reb Shimon and Pazi, the Yosef Kamar Rabbi Kiva, and he said this is only the shita of Rabbi Kiva. But whatever the case is, there was a shiloh about what the halach is with Havdalah with Kiyas. But one thing you see clearly that it happened that Yom Kippur fell out on a Sunday. It's actually a machlokes tanaim whether or not Chazal would fix it to push off Rosh Chodesh Tishrei to avoid having Yom Kippur on a Sunday. Where do you see there's such a machlokes? The Tanya Acher Moimrim Ein Bein Atzeres LaAtzeres Vein Bein Rosh Hashanah Alo Arba Yom Bavad. From year to year, Yom Tov always advances 4 days, and the reason is very simple. How many days are there in the Hebrew calendar? 354. 350 is divisible by 7, with the remainder of 4, which means that if this year Yom Tov is going to be on a Sunday, the next year it's going to be 4 days later because of that remainder of 4. And if there's an Ibayar, which had 29 days, again, there's a remainder of 1, which pushes it off a day. So what do you see from here? Acherim didn't modify the calendar ever because he always said, Ein Bein Atzeres LaAtzeres, only 4 days. If you modify the calendar, he couldn't say such a blanket rule. So you see from Acherim that you don't modify the calendar, which means according to Acherim, it is possible that Sukkot, the first day of Sukkot, will be Erev Shabbos, but the Chachamim argue on Acherim, and they hold, in fact, you do modify, and therefore you don't have a kasha. Zokumar Meisvei. Rosh Chodesh Shechol Yos b'Shabbos. What happens if Rosh Chodesh fell out on Shabbos? Shir Shel Rosh Chodesh Doicha Shir Shel Shabbos. The Shir of Rosh Chodesh will be Doicha the Shir of Shabbos. Frank the Gemara. Vim Isa. If you hold like Rabbi Chana, like we said earlier, who holds that you say both Musafin, you blow by both Musafin, you say the Shir of both Musafin. So Lema de Shabbos, Lema de Rosh Chodesh. Why is it a choice of 1 or 2? According to what we learned on Amar Aleph. According to what we learned on Amar Aleph. From Rabbi Chana, was it Rabbi Chana? Or was it Rabbi Chia? According to, if we look back on Amar Aleph, so I don't, who brought the Brisa? Or Rabbi Acha, sorry. According to what we saw from Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina, that he said from the extra psukim is that kol of musaf taken, you blow based on how many musaf there are. So why don't you do both? Do Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. Why do you only say the Shir of Shabbos? Reb Safra, by doicha, what does it mean doicha? It doesn't mean doicha that you only say the Shir Shal Rosh Chodesh and not the Shir Shal Shabbos. It means you say the Shir Shal Shabbos first. My doicha lakadeh. Gemara. Oh, I'm sorry. He says you say the Rosh Chodesh first, not Shabbos. Why do you say the Rosh Chodesh first? The Rosh Chodesh, it comes less frequently than the Shabbos. There's a specific reason why we're pushing Rosh Chodesh, which is the Ein Tadar, why we're pushing it first. It's Leida Shahukfa Rosh Chodesh Bismana, so that everybody should notice, hey, this is out of order, and this way they'll take note of the fact that today was Rosh Chodesh. Gemara, the Hayakera Avdinan, this is the hecker that they do. Hayakera Achrisa Avdinan. There's a different hecker that they do to make sure everyone's aware that it's Rosh Chodesh. The Tanya Chel they Tamid Shel Shachar, the Chalavim of the Tamid Shel Shachar, they would put it on the lower half of the Mizbeh, of the Kevesh on the right side. So when you're going up the ramp, it was at the lowest half. They piled up the Imurim there for the next claim, whose job it was to put it on top of the Mizbeh. It was Mechatzi Kevesh Ulamata. The Mizrach on the east side, which would mean on the right side going up the Kevesh. The Cheshel Musafin, if it was a day of Musaf that day, where do they put those Emurim if they didn't have a chance to get them onto Mizbech quickly enough? Nitnin Mechatzi Kevesh Ulamata B'Mayr on the left side. The Shal Rosh Chodesh, and if it was Rosh Chodesh, you know where they would put it? Nitnin Tachas Karkav Hamizbeach Lamata, it would be right above those of the Talmud. So you would put the Emurim of Rosh Chodesh above those of the Talmud. Why would you put them above those of the Talmud? But maybe you should put them below, especially since the Talmud you put on first. Again, people will see it's unusual, so therefore they'll realize that today was Rosh Chodesh. So Zok Gemara, why do you need a hecker of saying the Shir Rosh Chodesh first? You have a hecker by putting the Emurim on the Mizbeach in that position. The Gemara, Trey Akerim Dinan. What's wrong? You have two Akerim. The Chazi High, Chazi, the Chazi High, Chazi. Not everyone's going to notice every Shinui. We have two Shinuyim there so that there'll be more people that will notice that today was Rosh Chodesh. What do you mean?
Was in the morning.
Correct. Well, what happens? What if they didn't have a chance to put the Emurim on the Mizbeach and stuff was piling up, so they would pile it up on the kever?
I'm just saying, what time is that? It might have been early in the morning.
Well, the Musaf would have been later on.
No, the Talmud Shachar.
The Talmud Shachar is brought in is shechted in the morning, but the Musaf would be late. Would have been.
And the hecker is done on the Musaf.
Well, if the Emurim from the Talmud were not brought yet, and they're still sitting there on the ramp, and you have to bring now the Emurim of the Musaf, it would be put above it. So that shows that Rosh Chodesh is more prominent. There's a very interesting one-line choices that has a huge nachmin al halacha. When did the Gemara introduce the question of Tadav Shein Tadav? Only after the Gemara said Beichel Akadam. When the Gemara said that you do the Shir Shal Rosh Chodesh will be Deicha the Shir Shal Shabbos, the Gemara didn't ask I Tadav Kaidim. Why are you Deicha Rosh Chodesh for Shabbos? Shabbos should be first. The Gemara only introduced Tadav Shein Tadav Tadav Kaidim once we already knew you were going to say both, and the question was merely which did you do first. And Tosfos has little one-liner. We could have asked Tadav Shein Tadav even earlier when the Gemara wanted to use one to bump with the other. So there's actually a shaila. Most people hold you don't say Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim if it's a question of one or the other. But where is it relevant? It's relevant on Shabbos Chanukah, that's Rosh Chodesh. The Shabbos Chanukah is Rosh Chodesh. We learn first the Parshas Shavua, then Rosh Chodesh, right? And then Chanukah, right? So we're doing all three of them, and because of Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim, you do Shabbos first, you do Rosh Chodesh second, and you do Chanukah third. But the Haftarah we learn only of Chanukah, which is not Tadav. What's Pshat? So you see that the rule of Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim is not used to determine which one should be said if you're only going to say one. Once you're saying all three, Tadav Shein Tadav will tell you what goes first. By Chanukah, there's a special reason else for Sumanisa to say the Haftarah of Chanukah, but you don't use Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim to determine that. That's what they bring a raya from this Gemara, and this is exactly how we finish on Shabbos Chanukah. There's another interesting shaila about Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim. This was the shaila. Reb Chaim Kanevsky was going to. That's right, Kaidim. That's right. That's it. I mean, it's an order question. Reb Chaim Kanevsky was once walking with his father, the stipler, and they were walking to make birchas hachama. And on the way, they bumped into a blossoming tree. And there the question was, what do you make a bracha on first? Do you make a bracha on the blossoming tree because that's Tadr, that happens every year, versus birchas hachama, which happens every 28 years, I think? 28 years? Or you make a bracha on the birchas hachama? So one of them, I don't remember exactly who said what, but one of them said, it happened more than 28 years ago. One of them said that you should make a bracha on a tree. I think that's what the disciple said. And I think Reb Chaim Kanevsky asked his father, but what do you mean? What is the bracha that's made for the sun? You know what the bracha that we make is? Oysa Ma'aseh Bereshis. It's Oysa Ma'aseh Bereshis, which is the same bracha we make on lightning, right? So that bracha is Tadir. Because we make a bracha on lightning a lot more than we make a bracha on the 11th, more than once a year. So maybe Tadav Shein Tadav Kaidim should be the birchas hachama. Oysa Ma'aseh Bereshis. Don't we make that bracha when we see lightning? No, the bracha of Oysa Ma'aseh Bereshis should make a lot more frequently than the birchas ha'olamas, because we don't only make it when we see the sun. So the question is, maybe that's Tadir. So maybe the birchas hachama should be first, because the bracha itself is a bracha that's more Tadir.
The Goyim was giving the shear,
Right?
to his Talmidim, with Chaim, with Zalman, and all of a sudden, lightning.
Right.
So they made the bracha. So the Goyim looked up from his Gemara, And he said, I don't understand. Why is everybody making a bracha? Because the white man.
He's near it.
He says, it doesn't bother me that you made the thing. It bothers me that you saw it and that you heard it. So maybe Reb and Steifer never heard it.
So let me tell you the halacha. The halacha is there's a shayla over here. You know what the shear was for Rosh Chodesh? I'm sorry. You know what the shear was for Shabbos? The shear for Shabbos was they took Parshas Hazinu and they split it into 6 sections, and every Shabbos they said one of the sections. So, Fregen the Achronim, come to Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh is more tighter than Shabbos because Rosh Chodesh the shear they sang every month, and the shear of Shabbos each tikkun was only every 6 weeks. So they answer that you see from here that Tadav Shein Tadav doesn't go on the actual wording, the actual bracha that you say. It's the inyan that you're talking about. So Birchas Hachama might be the same wording for the bracha, but the Birchas Hachama doesn't come often. Therefore, Avada, you make the Birchas Hailanis first because it's Tadav Kodesh. Yeah. I don't know if that's a disciple answer. I heard these 2 separate stories. I'm putting them together.
Pass by mitzvah.
The sun's also very funny. Right now, there's right there. You don't mean a specific place.
Why did they say as soon as they walk in the door?
I don't know. That's a very good question. I don't know where they were headed to say it. You have to see the sun. If it's cloudy, you don't make Birchas Hachama.
For sure. And people took an airplane. Boston Red.
Are you sure?
I'm saying it was cloudy. Maybe they were in a shady spot. Maybe they didn't see it.
I hear. There's also a shayla, and it's just a lachlamai. So what happens if the whole trip is in the middle of Leila Megillah? It's the 14th day of the month, right? And they couldn't say Kiddush Levana the whole time because it was cloudy. And it opens up in the middle of Megillah. You're sitting in the middle of the Megillah ending, and it opens up to the moon. So the halach is they're supposed to be mafsha the Shulchan Aruch says you got to stop. This was a Nadi. I think the Nadi Yudah has this quoted from. You have to stop the middle. The whole order stops in the middle of the Megillah ending, and they go outside to say Kiddush Levana, and they come back in. I don't know. But what happens if everybody already said Kiddush Levana just about Koyer didn't say Kiddush Levana? Then the halach is if he didn't start yet, he can delay it and take Kiddush Levana. I'll try to guide him. But if he's a middle, he cannot stop.
First, I never saw. We never had an example that in Kippur